My guest today had his own rude awakening a few years ago, and I'm so delighted to welcome Dannion Brinkley to the show. Dannion, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure to be with you, and congratulations on your listenership expansion.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm sure our listeners would love to hear about your story, particularly your first near-death experience. Let's begin there.
Well, this was 1975. It was a Wednesday afternoon in South Carolina. I had never heard of the near-death experience. Dr. Raymond Moody had not written his fabled, legendary book, Life After Life. He's the person who coined the phrase NDE, or near-death experience. I'd never heard of it. I'd lost a lot of faith in spirituality from growing up around fundamentalist Christians, and so I never did believe a lot of that stuff to begin with, so where else do you go? I mean, South Carolina is not a place in 1975 to find a lot of spiritual awareness. And so I was just talking on the telephone to a friend, and lightning struck the phone line. It came down the phone line. It hit me in the side of the head just above my ear. It went down my spine. It welded the nails of the heels of my shoes to the floor. It threw me in the air. It suspended me in the air and slammed me back down on the bed. Dead for 28 minutes. Completely paralyzed for 6 days. Partially paralyzed for 7 months. It took me 2 years to learn to walk and feed myself. But in the course of this, Peter, I had what is now the classic near-death experience, and so far, according to Raymond and Paul Perry, it was probably the most extensive. And I think it's because I'm obsessive-compulsive and I have a good memory, especially when you're dead. And I discovered that almost everything everybody's ever believed about death never happens. Everything that we were told, Jesus had to come and save us, and you were going to either go to heaven or hell, or, these are the 2 points that people deal with, and are they living the good life, and is the great book of judgment, and is St. Peter there, all that stuff that you're told. None of that ever happens. The first thing you do is you lift out of your body, and you have a spiritual consciousness, and you have a sense of safety. You know this place better than you know any place you've ever been. It's like home. It's like been on a long trip and standing on your front porch, getting ready to open the door to walk back into the house, into your own home. And you have this sense of awareness. I always call this the blue-gray place. And then I was in the ambulance. I mean, I was floating above myself. I was watching what was going on. But the thing that was most important to me, I don't like the term shocking, Peter, but the thing that was most important to me was the fact that I was one step removed. I saw myself lying on the bed, but I had absolutely no interest. I was more interested in the energetic, in the movement, the colors, the hues, the beautiful, brilliant energy fields that exist all around us, but in the physical form we don't see. Everything had consciousness. I mean, the plants were paying attention. There were plants in the room, and I could tell that the plants were paying attention to what was happening to me. It was an empathetic point of view. I think one of the big issues for me now is whenever I see a garden or ever I see flowers blooming, I stop and I admire it, and I pay attention to it, and I look at it because I know it's looking back. And it's always amazed me how we have become so destructive to our planet. But I grew up basically as a jerk. I'm a big old hulking guy, and I was fast with my fist, and I grew up like this. And I realized that there is no way that this serves anything, and this is why. I come down a tunnel. And I come into this place of the most bright, brilliant, beautiful light. And the thing that amazed me about that was that the ball of fire that moved through the room burnt my eyes really bad, and I wore welder's glasses for almost 2 years. I couldn't watch television or go outside in the bright sun without them on. And when you enter this light on the other side in that particular dimension, it's bright and brilliant and shimmery, but it has no effect on what is your vision. And in this place, I was met by this being, this brilliant, beautiful being. that was a sense of safety. It was that I sensed everything was okay. You know, and people say, well, Dannion, what was that being like? Well, it was luminous and bright and brilliant. But the feeling I got was, you know, if you get caught by your dad for doing something bad, you're going to take a really good spanking. At least that's what it was in my day.
Yeah, right.
Or if you get caught by your granddad, you just got to listen to it for 15 or 20 minutes, and when it's over, you could probably still get 50 cents off of it. Well, when you meet this being of light is going to be like getting caught by your granddad. You know, it's no big deal. It's a place of safety and of comfort. And everybody has a lot of names for this being: Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Allah, Krishna, all these names. But you know, I write about it in Saved in Secrets. That being is really you. And people all of a sudden stop and they say, how could that possibly be? And in Secrets, one of our last book, I write about how exactly it can be. And you never realize in this physical life that you've never left heaven. And it always startles people when I say that, but simply this. If you take an atom, which is the basic structure of physical matter, and you look at it under an electron microscope, it's 94.6% empty space. And physical matter is never more than 5%. So no matter what, the world that you see is never more than 5% real. And then the 94.6%, what they now call empty space, now they have a new term for it. They call it dark matter. And they built the CERN, the collider in Switzerland, because they want to create the Big Bang, because they have detected this dark matter, which is, they say, the universe hangs in. So now all of a sudden, 94.6% of you has never left the universal connectiveness. And we get focused into the physical world because you can hurt it. You can pinch it or hurt it or damage it. But you've never left heaven, and you never will. There is no way you can separate from the divine. There's no place you can go. So this is like an adventure in growth. And now how I come to that conclusion, Peter, is this. After I met this being and felt that sense of safety, I saw my entire life pass before me in a panoramic life review, a hologram. I never missed a single thing. And what people don't understand, if you think you're a know-it-all now, wait till you're dead. You will truly know what a know-it-all is, because when you watch your life review, you will know how many hairs was in the nose of the doctor who pulled you from your mother. You will know every label, everything there is. You have missed nothing in your entire life. Then you'll watch it from a second-person point of view to see the choices that you've made, and then to see if you made the right choice equal to the options, because it gives you a clear perspective on who you identified yourself as. And then third, you literally become every person that you ever encounter, and you feel the direct results of your interaction between you and that person. I think that this was the most amazing point for me, because I realized that all those people I had beat up, I was only beating up myself. And you all of a sudden realize that I was tired of hitting myself in the face. And when you know that you're going to be every person you ever encounter, number one, you realize this: no one ever gets away with anything. Number two, it's a fair and just universe. Number three, you are responsible. You are. And then there comes this system of judgment. And we've always heard in religion, it's the great book of judgment, or St. Peter's going to judge you. Well, who judges you is you. And nobody knows more about you than you do. And the methodology in the judgment is this, and this is a Dannion term, but if God couldn't come today, or if divinity could not come today as you would define it, and it sent you, in the life you just reviewed, what difference did divinity make? If God couldn't come today, God sent you. In the life you just reviewed, what difference did God make? That was the turning point in my life that changed it all, because all of a sudden I became responsible for my life. I became responsible, and it was my part to be a part of the divine, to help fulfill and bring divinity into this world, caring and kindness and and support and integrity compared to the person I was before. So it wasn't fear of death, or it wasn't all that other stuff that you deal with that changed me. It was this. And the fact that I've been through this same experience 2 more times, 14 years later, because of damage done by lightning, I had to have open heart surgery, and I had a second near-death experience. And then 7 years after that, based on damage done by the lightning and the open heart surgery, I had to have brain surgery. So in 22 years, I've been through 3 of these experiences. And then you always ask, well, what did you do with your life? I became a hospice volunteer. What you learn is, what is your spiritual mission? You teach best what you most need to learn. What I needed was patience, because I didn't have any. And I was an asshole. So if you combine those 2 things, excuse my French, everybody, but if you combine those 2 things into a place, what you have is a really brutal, self-serving, egomaniacal fool. And that's who I was. I've now been a hospice volunteer for 33 years, and I just went 4 hours over 26,000 hours. I have 26,000 hours at the bedside.
Wow. Dannion, we're actually coming up to our first break, so we'll take the break, and on our return, we'll continue with this absolutely fascinating story. Welcome back to Awakening to Conscious Co-Creation, and I'm your host, Peter Tung, and I have with me today Dannion Brinkley, and we're talking about Dannion's near-death experiences. And Dannion, I have a couple of questions following that first period on the show. What brought you back during that first experience?
They sent me back. After I had the panoramic life review, Peter, I went to a place, this being of light, which was really me, stayed with me until I went to this crystal city. We don't all come from the same place over there. We come from different aspects, like in the angelic orders. They say there's 178,000 different orders, 178 different orders of angels, from cherubs to Spharians. And so we don't all come from the same place, and we each have our crystal city. In my Father's house there are many mansions. We each have a place that we come from, and I went there, and I became aware of all knowledge. I met these 13 beings, these beautiful, radiant beings. A lot of people would call them angels, but I didn't see any wings. I didn't see anything like that. But these beings represented honesty and integrity, and they gave me these. At the time that they gave them to me, I didn't know it was the future. I'd never had a near-death experience, so I didn't have a line of consciousness to follow at that time. And then once I had seen these visions, they said, you have to go back. They didn't tell me why. And if anybody would have told me I would have had to go back, they would have never found me. And then all of a sudden, after this, I flashed, and I was floating above in a hallway. And I could see it was a hospital. And I knew I was looking for my body, but I was not consciously thinking about looking for my body. Because the last time I saw it, it was a little stiff. And I was trying to figure out, if I was supposed to find this body, number 1, how do you get back into one? Number 2, how do you make it work? Because I was paralyzed, remember? I was paralyzed. And so all of a sudden I saw a foot inside a doorway. And what had happened when I came into the hospital, patient unconscious, patient not breathing, no EKG. So there was a busy night. I guess they worked on me. I've kind of followed that up, and there's 3 or 4 different stories because I wasn't there for any of that. And then I saw this body. But what happened when I saw the sheet coverage, I was covered with a sheet and had some paperwork on my feet, and all of a sudden I began to feel everybody's sense of loss. It was people's sense of loss, and they were grieving. And I began to associate it. And then the friend, Tommy, who was the guy who was on the other end of the phone, who had come over and who had tried to do resuscitation on me, he was coming down the hall. And I could feel his loss, and since he'd been a corpsman in the Navy, he knew the deal. He knew the lingo to get back into this room. And all of a sudden, I'm back in my body. I open my eyes. I can't see. but I could feel the sheet. I can't move. I can't speak. My tongue was swollen in my mouth. So I started to blow on the sheet, and Tommy said, the sheet's moving. They pulled me back into the emergency room, and they resuscitated me. And they started to work on me and stabilize me, but no one ever asked me. They just sent me back. So, we always have a mission. We have a talent and a task. My task was to get over being me, and my talent was to just move forward and to create programs and things that I think can help people reduce the fear of death. We, Peter, have to change the concept of what death is defined as in the world, but especially in the Western consciousness. One of the greatest crises...
When you were working in hospice and you were talking with and helping people who are in a state of fear around dying, what do you say?
Well, you listen. Hospice and being at the end of life is not always talking about a near-death experience. I might 1 out of 20 people I talk to talk about that. There are 4 things that's going to happen in the end of life, and no matter who you are, no matter what you think, this is what. First, you're going to be angry. Second, you're going to wonder if you're going to hell. Third, you're going to wonder if you're going to heaven. And fourth, you're going to wonder if there's nothing after this. And this is where nobody cares what the weather is. They don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about the value of their life. Though we have created a medical paradigm that causes people to live a lot longer, quote unquote, on this side than sometimes they should, because we're all afraid of death, because we've become so religized about it. People should not fear this. You come here leaving, and you come here for a certain amount of time because you chose to come, but also you were chosen to come. You were chosen to come because the divine architect believes there is no one better than you to be born at the moment that you're born, for the work that you'll do to be the difference that divinity makes. The little acts of kindness, the kind of love and support, the friendly smile, the pat on the back that's going to be okay. And as my wife says, and Michael Beckwith says, who you should have on this show, Peter, is be of good cheer. I'm a kind of happy guy because 2 reasons. Number 1, I know you don't die. And number 2, I've never been to hell, and I've been over there 3 times. So I think they missed their chance at me. So when you know that and you look at this, we all give away our power because the person at the bedside is just as afraid of transition or death as the person in the bed. So we hope the preachers come in or the ministers come in to give support. We all want to be saved, all that kind of stuff. But none of that really fits into reality. It's a good story. It sounds really good. People want to know they have value. They want to know their life means something, and they want to celebrate it. And so what I talk about is things that happened in your life. What happened? What do you most remember? What was the best day you ever had? And one of my best things is, what is your favorite song and why? Because I can take a person from lying in that bed, and it was usually the first dance or the first kiss or, what was happening when they fell in love or when they met their first date, or when they're puppy. It's amazing what people's favorite songs are. And when you look at that, you start to really realize that you can take a person from a bed. You can take a person from a bed in a lot of pain back to the happiest moment. People want to know that they will be remembered. They want to know that their life had value. So I always recommend to family members, talk about little things that you remember about them that is funny, things that they said, things that happened that influenced them, like with your parents or like with your grandparents or with a friend. It may be something they don't remember, but it affected you. This is a celebration. No one ever dies, Peter. It will never happen. The 5% part of you that you release passes, thank God. But the spiritual part of you, the 94.6%, remains intact. And it stays there. And it is truly who you are. And if I can get people to stop for one moment and think that, We can change our whole healthcare paradigm. We can change what the fear of loss. Everybody's going to grieve. It's a part of the process. And a lot of times grief is about selfishness. Someone left you. I see it so often. I see people put their loved ones through some of the most horrendous stuff because it's not about whether it's better for them on the other side, which it most of the time is. It's that they don't want them to leave them. And I'm a big supporter of people coming to resolution. The hardest thing in America that we have is the system of closure. And I believe that this bleeds over into abuse, and child abuse, and psychopaths, and a lot of the psychosis and a lot of the evil, quote-unquote, that goes on in the world is our lack of ability to have closure. And until that really happens, and until we change the culture and the process by which we look at this life, we will be trapped in this. And what can you trust in these days? Can you trust religions and institutions, governments? You think your bank cares about you? What do you think? And when you lose the consciousness of who you are in your spiritual identity, not in your mental identity, and when you lose that part of you that is the most divine connection, then we subject ourselves to the crisis that we find ourselves in. One of the great things I listened in your introduction, this evolutionary consciousness that is happening, and we've been in it for probably the last 50 years, but it's in the last days of it. And, the Maya say 2012 is the end of the cycle. And I argue that because I'm not really sure that that's exactly when the cycle ends, because they have a 52-year cycle. They have 52-year period comes after that. I think it's 51.2 years. And what is happening is consciousness is changing. The universe is going through its 25,920-year cycle. So all things that we see that we build hope in, our false belief in what's called a fiat or fractal currency, in our governments, in our institutions, it's all failing. It's not because it's so bad. It's because it's never done in integrity. And those things will change and shift. We're looking at new cloud formations. Look at all the raining in Tennessee and in the South and Texas. And they're discovering neutrino buildup in clouds. It's never happened before. And these things are beginning to happen. Now we have to watch for solar flares, the intensity of hurricanes, the intensity of tornadoes. These things are happening because the cosmic energy, based on where our solar system is, and moving what's called to the galactic center. And if you know what our galaxy, the Milky Way, looks like, our little solar system and our little 10 or 12 planets, probably 14 planets, is moving to the center of the galaxy, which, if you know, it's an oblong shape with an empty center. Well, we're rotating there, and it's called the precession of the equinox, where we go through each of the zodiac signs. And this has been going on since the beginning of time, and this happens every 25,920 years, where we're there. And the Maya knew more about it than anybody, and here we are.
Well, and at the end of the last segment, Dannion, you were beginning to unravel the information about this present time and the Maya calendar and what our future holds. So what is your advice? What do you say people need to be doing at this time of incredible shift and change?
Number one, realize that it's a cycle, that this is a part that happens and that they chose to be here. Because some of us have to step up to the plate and to hold the line. You make sure you get as much out of debt as you can. We have created a fractal fiat currency. And think about America. We gave away our industrial base so we could buy things cheaper on credit. Now, how crazy is that? And we have to realize that we have been lured into this insanity. The greatest thing about the visions, if anyone goes to Dannion.com, Dannion.com, and they read Saved by the Light, At Peace in the Light, and the newest one, The Secrets of the Light, which I talk about all this stuff, You realize this. The crisis that we are is allowing ourselves to delude ourselves to believing that wealth has to do with material. People are doing what they're supposed to do. This system will collapse because it's based on an illusion. And the new system will rise. A new one, an economic collapse, right on the course of it. Why? We've been broke for 8 years, and we keep borrowing money just like the Greeks. They will never pay the money back. We could never pay back $12, $13 trillion, and we have $59 trillion in unsecured obligations. Think about what a trillion is. Put it in real terms. 1 million seconds is 12 years. 1 trillion seconds is 30,000 years. Now, when you start thinking about that and realize that we owe $13 trillion right off the bat and $59 trillion, that system needs to collapse. That's what it needs to do. And the system of integrity should rise. And this is the natural cycle. Be smart, everybody. Find your spiritual identity. Get to know your neighbors. Get to where you care about no one is torturing or punishing you. We brought ourselves here. And the system collapses because it doesn't deserve a spiritual being's attention. The biggest crisis will not be over oil. It will be over water. And what we have to do is commit ourselves to paying attention to your water supply. Where does your water come from? You know, and how pure is that water? This begins to be the crisis. You can't live off of bottled water, everybody. We drank enough bottled water in the United States last year to line up bottles around the earth, those little bottles we drank out of, 175 times. That's crazy. And what we have to look at is this. We have allowed a system to come that only keeps us in debt. And it's just zeros and ones anymore. It's not even paper. It's just zeros and ones. It's just computer-created, generated value. And this is where we have to get to know each other. We have to pay attention to each other. We have to be kind and courteous. I'm excited. I mean, and I'm a lot in the places where a lot of other people are, but I made plans for this 30 years ago, and I'm living in an ideal where I keep storing. I make sure there's enough water in the house, and I make sure I have natural gas and propane, and I make sure that I can last a month or two on food, because these things are going to happen. But it's an exciting time to be innovative and creative, and it's time to rebuild our world. We're never going to go back. And for all of us who grew up, now I'm 60 years old, for all of us who grew up in America, it disappeared in 2008. The world we grew up in disappeared, but we're in a new world. And what has to happen is we look into our spiritual identity. We learn how to say our prayers in willful, conscious intent. I mean, I write about Peter, and I tried to take all that I've learned from being at the bedside, because one of my favorite quotes is, "The dying tell the truth." And when you learn to listen to a person in transition, you learn a lot about listening to politicians on television and ministers and preachers and priests, and you learn to hear in their voices. And I've been with ministers, priests, rabbis. I've seen all of these people face the end of life. They're angry. Am I going to hell? Am I going to heaven? And what if there's nothing? And the other day I did a show, and a person says, I don't believe that there's anything after this. It's just nothing, and you just go back to nothing, and there's nothing after that. And he was a little forceful, and I started laughing. And he says, "Why are you laughing?" I said, "Fool, are you in for a surprise?" I can't wait for all those atheists. This is an exciting thought for me. Well, I don't believe any of that. Well, so what? A lot of people think the world's still flat, but guess what? We have this rare opportunity to take part in the evolution of consciousness. People will be able in this next 4 years to see into other dimensions, to other realities. Quantum physics and quantum mechanics. Think about the global network that is the computer system, and it has consciousness. It'll be like Stanley Kubrick's when he did 2001: The Space Odyssey. With all the blogging and with all of the viral stuff that's going on, even like this show, the whole world can hear this show. They can sit at their computer and they can hear this show. We do Kinetics Magazine for spiritual sustainability. Kat and I, she does most of it. But we're in 45 countries, and it's amazing to me, Peter, that our second largest audience is China. And
interesting.
We have probably 200,000 people who read the magazine every month, but the second largest audience is the Chinese. And for me, that's empowering. Spiritual sustainability, it's called Kinetics. Anyone can go to Dannion and click on it. But I've seen this. We win, everybody. We can't just sit on our cans and hope for the best. You can only trust your own spiritual relationship with yourself. Who are you? My big push is this. There are 4 major things. Number 1, everything's about love. Everything. How much love did you give and how much love did you receive? Number 2, belief. What do you believe about your love? We have created this mindset based on being born in the original sin. And number 2, we got to be saved. That you're a sinner, and until you do certain things, you're never going to be saved. Well, that works really well for people who've never been dead, but it doesn't work when you have. And what happens is we lose a certain value of ourselves, and we give our love, and we never give it a value until someone gives it back. And the whole world goes crazy then. We put ourselves through abuse. We put ourselves through persecution, robbery, desecration, because we think that we've deserved it, because we never placed a value on our love. And once you put a value on your love, then you have choices. And being able to make the right choices based on that you believe your love is divine and that you're giving it out of the pureness of your heart, then the choices that you make is who gets it and who doesn't, as opposed to hope you're going to like me or I'm going to keep on to maybe you'll do right or maybe you'll appreciate me. All that's stupid. And then the right choices that you make. And then number 4, how do you push this forward? Prayer. And why I use the term prayer, because it's so used, but I define prayer like in the book Secrets, willful, conscious intent. Because when you use the definitions of those words, and I define it, and Catherine and I write about it, then you use to see how prayer is empowerment, not about, Lord, just let me get through this, or Lord, please, if you get through this, I won't ever do it again. And, everybody's trying to get away with something in prayer, and then they pray for other people. But mostly it's about trying to get away with something so you don't go to hell. Well, in the third near-death experience, Peter.
Actually, Dannion, we're coming up to our last break here, so let's continue with this after we've taken this break, so you can, on our return, just fill us in on your third near-death experience, which I'd love to hear about. Welcome back to Awakening to Conscious Co-Creation with your host, Peter Tung. And I have with me today Dannion Brinkley. And Dannion, you were just about to start talking about your third near-death experience before the break. Just continue with that.
Well, what happened, Peter, and I think this is important based on the whole show that we've done about finding your spiritual grounding and really taking the time to look at what you believe in faith and to really look at the near-death experience, because how people relate it. In the third experience, when I was having brain surgery, I went into this blue-gray place. And in this blue-gray place, what I became aware of was the first 2 times I thought I was the only one there. I thought I was the only one there. But all of a sudden I realized that there were dimensions and levels in this place. So I started to pay attention to it and look to see. Then the tunnel formed, and I went down the tunnel, and I began to have the panoramic life review again. But I knew everything about the panoramic life review. I'd already been through 2. So my obsessive-compulsive personality type, even dead, I'm like that. I got fixated on the blue-gray place, and the next thing I know, I was back there. I got about halfway through the near-death, through the panoramic life review, and I was back. There is a place where we, by choice, not by condemnation, and I think the Catholics called it purgatory, and the Hindus have a name for it, and the Buddhists have a name for it, and the Tibetans have a name for it, but there is a place where if you haven't grounded yourself spiritually, not religiously, but spiritually, then you'll trap your own self. A lot of people don't want to go to the light. They don't really realize that they have passed from this world. They wander trapped. They're doing it to themselves, and in the course of doing it to themselves, they trap themselves. I spent 2 days in recovery, Peter. I spent 41 hours in recovery, and I think it was because I wasn't supposed to make it back. But number 2, I realized that this world, with the way it's so unstable and the lies and deceptions of what we put our trust in, creates a world where people trap themselves. You stay there only as long as you takes to come to realize it, but you continue the same patterns. Thieves are still thieves. People who have given up, a lot of veterans. I saw a lot of veterans because once you've gone through the near-death experience or in combat or if you've been in a VA hospital, you realize that you couldn't trust it, and you've lost faith. And there were so many veterans trapped there is why I created a Twilight Brigade. Everybody, you have to stop and put your faith in you. And you put your faith in your spiritual self, the real, true you that is caring, and kind and loving. If God couldn't come today and God had sent you, in the life you will review, what difference did God make? And it's about truly being caring and truly being concerned and truly opening up your heart. Most people will never get trapped in this place, Peter, but I think it's part of the grand mission of me being here. And it's a part about changing your life today. Believe in the goodness of you. And trust in the kindness of the divine. And don't wait for something to save you or be afraid of living. People who are afraid of death are only afraid of living. And I will see there are so many people who are going to trap themselves because everything they put faith in has failed them. And, you know, this new health care plan, I'm not a big advocate or fan of it because I read into it, because I've lived in health care now 35 years. I read into it what it really means. And we have to come and find this place. We have to take better care of ourselves. We can't depend on pills. People need to take care of themselves. They need to take care of this physical temple that they have, and they need to be kind and loving. And more importantly, I don't believe there's any such place as hell. I mean, I just think there's varying degrees of heaven. How in the world could you move outside of the universe to create a place that you can eternally be damned? Quantum physics says not only is that impossible, it makes it really unrealistic. I want people to trust in themselves and live this life to the fullest and put as much love and care and happiness. And I like for people to go to Dannion.com. And I'd like for people to come live in my world. And, you know, a lot of it you may agree with it, and a lot of it that you don't, but at least it broadens your perspective. And I wrote... And
I'm actually going to have to call you to a close. We've come to the end of the show, and you've given us a wonderful, wonderful talk and lessons today in living our lives to the full. Dannion, that's DANNION.com, and I'm sure many people will come to your website, and I really, really appreciate you being on the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and be blessed, and good luck, Peter.
Thank you so much indeed, Danny. Wonderful.